So welcome everyone, and today an exciting topic, and I wanted to be very careful with this topic because, like Scott explains, never count the money in anybody else's pocket. So I know that you know that, but we also need to understand when you are buying real estate, you want to buy at the right price, and you want to know the fundamentals. You want to know what the value of the property is, what the after repair value is, and what is the as is value. And so I thought that might be a really interesting topic. So that's what I'm going to be discussing today. And so let's just get right into it. And just like all the time, just if you have questions, don't put them in the chat. Just raise your hand in the in Zoom so I can call on you once we're done. And so the topic is wholesaling slow flips. So if you Google the word real estate wholesale, the idea is traditionally real estate wholesale requires selling to someone who is going to fix and flip the property. All right. And so this graphic gives an idea of what the idea of wholesale is. The reason why do a lot of people do wholesale, that's where the money is. Now you could do a wholesale and you can buy a rental. That's also possible. And you could have a lot of different things happening in that process, which means you could actually buy a property from a wholesaler, sit up, but instead of selling it, you could rent it. So that could be another formula. So I'm trying to generalize it so you understand. Traditionally, that's our slow flip model is different, right? So that's why I'm going to talk about it in the next few slides. But I wanted to start with, what the traditional idea is. If you're wholesaling and somebody is buying for a fix and flip, this is what the transaction looks like. If you look at the graphic, you have original property, and you're a wholesaler. You want to sell it to someone who is the investor who's going to buy. You actually have to do quite a bit of analysis. You have to make sure that the numbers will work, because if the numbers won't work, a couple of things will happen. Number one, you won't be able to sell it to the investor because the investor will run their own numbers and they'll figure out that there's not enough spread in there for them to make a profit, which means after they repair the property, after they have the costs of commissions and closing and everything, there's not enough meat on the bone. So that's the term that I like to use, that professional wholesaler always know that you have to leave enough meat on the bone for the other person, whoever the buyer is, to be able to make their spread. Okay, so that's really important. So that's in the traditional fix and flip model. Everybody knows this. And that's why if you ever meet a professional wholesaler who's been doing this for a very, very long time, you will know that traditionally they don't make a very, very big spread on their wholesale deal. They just make enough spread, and they might make one or two big deals where they have a big spread, but they make sure, absolutely make sure, that when they sell to their own buyer and investors, they will make money. Because as soon as they start selling properties to their investors and the investors find out that these were not the deals that they were getting before, guess what? They'll stop buying from these wholesalers. All right. So I thought it's a good idea to at least start with that idea of understanding, well, what people traditionally did in the wholesale. All right. So now let's talk about, because we're all doing wholesaling slow flips. So now we're going to talk about what's happening in our community and what we should be doing, because there is a little bit confusion even when I look at some properties, and I look at them and I'm not sure if these are the properties somebody should be buying. So that's why I'm going to give some examples, but instead of using any example from the community, I thought I'll just use my properties as an example. All right. So when you're wholesaling slow flips, many wholesalers don't necessarily care about the ARV or as-is value of the property. So if you look at all the properties that are, I'm not saying everybody does that, but most of the properties that you see listed there, they may or may not mention ARV or as-is value. What they're primarily talking about is, well, how much you can get down for it and what would it rent for. So in other words, if you look at this carefully, there are three things I'm talking about. I'm talking about after repair value, as is value, and rental comms. So in my opinion, when you're looking at a slow flip, you should be looking at all three of these things. So what's happening is right now, and I'm not saying all the wholesalers are doing bad, but many of the wholesalers are not really worrying about it or giving you enough information about the ARV or as is value, and they're just pushing the idea of, how much down payment you can get and how much can it rent for. So in my opinion, you should look at the ARV, you should look at the as is value, and then of course you should look at the rent, which is of course one of the most important factor. All right. But no matter what happened, no matter who you're buying from, never pay more than the property is worth. So if you're doing your numbers and you said, well, I'm ready to buy, but you don't know the ARV and you don't know the as is value, then do you really know if you're buying a good deal? Probably not, right? So that's why these three things are important in my opinion. All right. So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you an example, and these are my properties so we can have an idea, because I've also learned from my mistakes, and I wanted to be transparent and show you that, some deals that you get in the market will and can be really good wholesale deals. But some deals that you get in the market, they may look like a good wholesale deal, but they'll be terrible wholesale deal. And the reason why they're going to be terrible is because the same word I'm going to use, there's not enough meat on the bone. All right. So let's take this property. This is one of my property, 402 Elder Drive in Toledo. And it's a very big house. Well, comparatively, 1,140 square feet, 3 bedroom, 1 bath. Generally habitable, but it did have some small roof damage somewhere. Not roof, ceiling damage. The roof was perfectly fine. Ceiling damage. The garage just needs to be demolished. It's just really old, so it cannot be used. But otherwise, it was habitable. It was listed on the MLS for $24,000. So in case you guys are wondering, well, you can't find, they are property like these on the MLS every single day. You just have to search. All right. So here's the scenario. When I did my underwriting, so remember I did this, and this was a property that I bought a little bit later. So I did all my numbers, and I did find that my ARV after repair, no, sorry, my as is value for this home was about $58,000. It is a larger home. And my ARV was coming around $90,000. And based on the rental comms, I was looking at getting somewhere between $900 to $1,000 for a home like this, right? Now, if I wanted to wholesale this property, I could buy this property for $22,000. It was listed at 24. I could, I'm sure I'm easily be able to negotiate down to 22. I could wholesale it for $30,000 and then market that it could rent for $900. Now, if I did this, here's what the scenario would be, right? Me as a wholesaler, I would have had it on a contract for $22,000, and I'm rounding out the numbers. And if I sold it for $30,000, I would made a profit of $8,000 on the wholesale spread, right? Okay, but let's look on the buyer side. The buyer would have a built-in equity of $28,000. That's the difference between what they're paying for and what the as is value is, right? And if it rent for $900 a month, the net profit would be about $132.62 cents a month with a PML. Without a PML, obviously, it'd be much higher. But I always like to use that because the assumption is that at some point you're all going to have PMLs on most of the property. Maybe not some right now, but at some point they're all going to have them. So you always want to see, or maybe you have some properties that you bought with your own funds, but maybe you're going to find a PML and then fill that property that way. So the taxes and insurance come out to be about $100 a month. All right. So if you look at this, this is actually a great deal. So that's why I think something like this is a great deal, because not only you're making nice spread, but look at the buyer. The buyer's making enough spread not on the equity side, but also on the profits. It's a really good slow flip, right? So and by the way, this is the formula that I use that is pretty common. A lot of people use it. I use it. I don't offer anything more for a property based on the as is value. So I figure out that as is value. In this case, it was about $58,000. and 70% of that was $40,000. I would not have paid anything over this amount for this property. Obviously, this property was listed way lower than that. So obviously I got it at way lower than that. All right. So this is a wholesale scenario, right? So good wholesale property. Now let's talk about what ended up happening. Obviously, I didn't wholesale it because I had a private money lender. So what could be better if you can take a property and either do a wholesale, so you only made a money one time, but if it's a really, really good property, you could probably do both, right? Which I did. So what I did was I took the property, I bought the property at $22,000. I have a PML at $30,000, and at closing I made 8 grand, the spread between that, right? And it does rent for $900 a month right now. Taxes and insurance is about $100 a month. So my PML payment is 667.33, and my net income is 132.67 for the property per month. So it worked for me. It's a great property, and it works both ways. It works as a wholesale, and it works as a slow flip for myself, right? Okay, so and by the way, the status on this, it's the tenant is
What's that?
current on this, and on an average, I make $990
I know,
almost every month.
I know,
Can you please mute your
I
mic?
know. I read that too.
Can you please mute your mic, please? Um, so on an average, and if you know, Joey has shared this with all of us many times. On an average, you're going to make a lot more money on this because maybe half or more. In my case, it's almost most of my tenants pay late. One or two may pay right on time. So I always have late fees accumulated. So in this case, I'm getting on an average $990 for this property. All right. And the tenant is gone. All right. Now let's take a scenario of a bad wholesale deal. Now, like I said, I didn't want to obviously take any deals from the community, and I wanted to use my own deals. So I'm not ashamed to admit that I made a mistake, and this is my mistake, and so you can maybe learn from this. All right. So this was a property in Peoria, Illinois. It is a property, 2 bedroom, 1 bath, 730 square feet. It's a perfectly habitable property. It was owner occupied. There was absolutely no repairs required. So when I found this property, it was listed at $35,000. I don't know. It was one of my first properties, and in my mind, I was in the wrong mind frame, and I also did not follow my own advice. I did not do the ARV on this, so I made a mistake. And so this is what I want to show you because this is something that may come across on the forum or somebody else trying to sell a property to you. This is an example of a bad wholesale. So this was listed at 35. And then I did do at the end when I finally did, I should have followed my own advice. The as is value was about $34,310, which is what it was pretty much listed at, right? The ARV for this was about 60 grand. And the expected range for the rent was pretty wide, actually. It was between 700 to $1,350. All right. So why would this be a bad wholesale deal? Well, I mean, you could always have jacked up the price, but let's assume you can buy this property at $30,000 and you jack up the price to 35 to have a spread in there, and you estimate that it might rent for $800, right? But what might happen is that you as a wholesaler made a $5,000 assignment fee because you wanted to wholesale it, but look what happens to the buyer. The buyer does not have any equity in it. Remember, this deal was basically not even worth $35,000 as is. So you got to know your as is value, and your estimate is that it might rent for $800. So your net profit on this is you're barely going to make any money if you have a PML. Your taxes and insurance, again, I'm rounding them out to $100 a month. So this would be an example of a bad deal. That if you are a wholesaler, you should not try to wholesale this deal because there's not enough meat on the bone. And if you're buying these wholesale deals, well, you need to know your numbers to know where you stand. It doesn't matter. Let's say you say, well, I didn't have a PML on this property. Well, yes, but then you have no equity in this property at all. And remember, in real estate, no matter what happens, you never want to pay more than what it's worth. So whether it burns down or, God forbid something else happen, you want some built-in equity in it. That's the whole idea of real estate. All right. So this is a bad wholesale deal. So what is the status of this? Well, and I learned from my mistake. I bought this property for $30,000. I have a $30,000 loan on it, and I didn't make any spread on it at closing. The only reason why I had to pay 30,000 more in it, there was a couple in there. They were really, really sick, and they were in very desperate condition and situation, and they really wanted 30,000 before they couldn't move without that money. So again, I made a mistake. I agreed to that price, and I ended up paying that. So now this property did rent for $800, but I found out the market in this specific area was not more than $750. So I'm getting only $750 for this. Taxes, insurance, still $100. My PML payment is $667.33. Guess what? I'm losing about $17 a month on this property. But that's fine. At the end, I've had this property for about a year now, so it's going to be paid off, and that's okay. But I learned from my mistake, and I wanted to, be transparent and show everyone, what a bad wholesale deal could be, or even for yourself. So even though whether I wholesale or not, for me, it didn't turn out to be a good deal, a slow flip deal. All right. So what are the three key takeaways? Always figure out your after repair value of the house. Always figure out the as is value of the house. Use the MAO, the maximum allowable offer that you want to place on the property, to have a figure out the built-in equity in the property, whether you're buying for yourself or you're going to wholesale it, right? So and now, in case you don't know how to do this, if you don't know how to do a ARV, or you don't know how to figure out the as is value, I have done a very detailed video on one video where I actually talk about both of these. I talk about ARV and I talk about as is value. And there's a lot of confusion about that. That's why I actually did that video. So if you go to the link, if Major is here, he'll put it in the chat. So you can go to that link and look for that video. So that's basically it. And if you have any questions, I can take those now. I don't see any raised hand. Please raise your hand so I can call on you. Thanks, Major.
Hey, Amir, yeah, I think there was some questions on your as is value. Would you compare that to being like a market value? Like if it's sold on the MLS today?
So as is value, meaning to say, so I mean, it's a whole detailed video that I did. What we are trying to say is, let's say there is a home that is perfect in any way that you can think of. It is completely updated. It has top of the line finishing for that neighborhood. It looks fantastic. I would call that a retail ready after repair value because it has been updated. The kitchen has been updated. It has nice countertop, nice paint finish job, new flooring and everything. So this is the after repair value of the house. Remember, we're talking about a lot of things, so I'm journalizing it because we could be talking about a brand new house. So that's a completely different conversation, right? So a brand new house will have everything new. We're not talking about that. We're talking about an inventory in a neighborhood where there were, let's say, homes built in the 90s. But this home is number one home as a reference point, is updated in every way. New flooring, new kitchen, new thing. That is your after repair value. Now let's look at another home that was built that's in the same neighborhood. Let's say same subdivision, which means same layout, same square footage, same number of bedrooms, but it has old original 90s countertops. It has original 90s cabinets in the kitchen, bathroom, everything from the 90s. That home is on the market and the owner has not done any upgrades on it. That would be the as is value of the house, right? So if you run comps and you're looking at a house, by the way, if you, again, this is a very long conversation, so I don't want to go into that. If you actually were to use comps, and if you know anything about how appraisals are done, this is what the appraisers do. So let's say there are only three comps, assumingly, let's say there are only three comps in the neighborhood, and the two homes that are comps are upgraded and has now nice countertop and everything, blah blah blah. So what the appraiser then does is he uh, deducts value from your as is home because your home is not like that home. So the answer is that your as is value would be different from your ARV value. So you have to understand what's the inventory in the neighborhood. What kind of a homes do you have in the neighborhood? Are there homes in the neighborhood that have gone through the full upgrade process? Now, within the rehab, by the way, there's a whole spectrum. Because remember, what if somebody, I mean, this has happened a lot of time, right? Somebody buys a home, and they say, you know what we're going to do? And this home needs a lot of work. You know what? We're just going to paint it and we're going to just fix some of the cabinets and then we're going to flip it. Well, guess what? That's not a full ARV because that's not a full potential for that property. Do you see what I'm saying? So if you watch my video, I actually have pictures of some of the property. In fact, I have a picture from Joey's property as a reference. So watch that video. It has more details. I only have like 18 minutes left, and I have questions. So let me take the question. Oh, sorry, Major. Any other question before I go to Jay?
No, just trying to cover the chat.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, Jay, go ahead. Unmute yourself.
Amir, when you're marketing the property for sale, are you marketing? Do you include the taxes and insurance in there for the payment, monthly payment, or just the PI?
So, you're talking about if I bought the property and I'm filling the property, is that what you're talking about?
Yes, when you're selling it to end buyer on
Right.
your
Okay.
marketing ads.
Right. So, in my case, I include the taxes. But the insurance, I don't include the insurance, but what Scott teaches us is that you can tell your tenant buyer that they can have their own renter's insurance, right? So in my case, I do add the taxes, and so in other words, when the CFD is finalized and then signed, if the we amount for the taxes, we figure out what the taxes are, what the interest. And remember, what our reference point is the usury law for the interest rate for that state. If
Yes,
if we hit that ceiling already for the monthly payment that we want, but we still haven't reached the monthly payment that we want, well, then you can ask them to pay part of the tax or all of the tax. So you got to work the numbers a little bit to come to what you need. Most of our fillers are really good. So if you ask them, since they do this every day, they can help you with that. Are,
got
are
it.
you
So
are you trying to fill it yourself?
yeah,
Okay. Well, there's nothing wrong with it, but I would also give it to other people in the community to help you fill it as well. And then you can
no,
ask
I,
them.
I got I got the buyer already. Actually, I'm just
Oh,
finalizing it.
okay.
Yeah. But it's good to know that you use the usury law first, then adjust based on that. So it's a good
Yeah, yeah,
thank you for that tip. It's a good strategy. So
because otherwise you do your contract and then you realize you've gone over the usury, and then all it takes is one call to someone saying that, hey, this guy is charging me, very, very high interest rate that's against, state laws or whatever. So check what your state laws are on usury and then work off of that.
perfect. Thank you so much.
You're
Appreciate
welcome.
you.
Sure. Michael, go ahead.
Hey, question. When you're selling a property and you're telling them you're selling it to them for contract for deed, but then you tell them to go get a renter's policy, how does that work out? Doesn't you ever get any pushback saying, "Well, hey, I thought you're selling it to me. Why do I need a renter's policy? I'm not renting it. I'm buying it."
Yeah, so all you're saying is, look, the property insurance, if you look at it strictly, let's say you have a home, right? If your bank sells you a home, the the bank doesn't have insurance. You have to buy insurance. So you know that. So you got to get insurance. What kind of insurance you want to get? Well, in the case of the bank wants them to be paid off in case the house burns down, right? What Scott teaches us is this. Look, you have two choices. You can force, and yes, you can, because as per contract for deed, uh, they should be paying for the insurance. But let me ask you this: if they buy insurance and they don't pay the premium, what will happen? If the house burns down, guess what? The house was not covered. So what Scott says is that you should go out and get your insurance, So
Right.
make sure you pay your premium. So in case something happens to the house, you're covered, especially when you have a private money lender. Now, if you don't have a private money lender, then you can decide what you want to do. But in this case, what you're saying is, I've never had anybody give me a pushback on it. Now, whether they get a renter's insurance or not, that's a different issue. In some cases, they don't get it,
Yeah,
which
that's the point I'm trying to make, right?
what difference does
And
it make to you? It doesn't make any difference to you. What will happen is if the house does burn down, their belongings and all that, you're not responsible for it, and they
mhm.
won't get anything out of it. So at some point, you have to treat them like adults. Let them figure the rest of these things out by themselves. You simply guide them by saying, look, as per terms of our agreement, you're responsible to get your renter's insurance. So in case there's a fire, all your belongings are covered. That's what you're saying, and that's what I do for my tenants.
Now, what happens if they say, well, gee, not only am I going to get renter's insurance, I'm going to go out and get a quote for the entire house in case, because now it's my house and I'm afraid of it burning down. What do you tell them then? Oh, don't worry about it. I still own it.
So, what Scott says about this is, remember, in case of a fire, there's only one insurance policy that takes precedence. Obviously, both policies won't pay anyway, right? So I had one tenant buyer, he was an investor. He insisted on paying the premium. But I insisted that if he pays the premium, I need to be on the policy to know exactly what's happening. And sure enough, I had to terminate his contract, and I immediately got a notice that he has canceled the policy. And so you can have it that way also, yeah, but it's just that a little bit risky. So the thing, Mike in our community is the guy who does all the insurance. He does all the insurance for me. So he kept me in the loop. He told me, hey, this guy is trying to buy insurance. And I already had an insurance on that property. And I said, fine, let him do that. But I want to make sure if there's ever a cancellation, I get notified. And so sure enough, I was added. And as soon as he canceled, I knew it. Within hours, we had a new policy on it.
Okay, so in that case, but during the time when he was still a good tenant, you essentially had two full policies on the property.
Well, in that case, there was one policy because he actually went to the same insurance company and he gave them the same address.
Okay,
So
but
yeah, so
but but
but in
if
that
I'm
case,
he- if
Mike
I'm
was the
good,
guy who was dealing with this, so he was able to do it. But you're right. If there was any other situation, I would want to be just in control of it so that I'm aware that the property at any moment is completely covered. That's all. It just
yeah.
has to be covered.
Hello, hello.
Hi, Joanne.
I'm
Nice to
glad you
see
come
you.
to me. Hi, I was at my kids' Christmas show tonight, so I
Okay.
just now and got changed. No, I'm glad you got me next because I was just going to add on to this whole insurance conversation. I've done some fillings, and somebody in particular was like, "Look, I'm done with trying to get tenant buyers to get insurance and qualify." So oh, hang on, let me move this. I'm staring towards you. There we go. And so on his contract, he asked me to write, he takes up the insurance policy and he just adds it on top. So if the monthly payment, with P&I and taxes is, 900 a month, and the insurance is $75 a month, then they pay $975. And he says that way it's insured once, I know it's insured, and it's just easier that way. So it's just another option to think about for people. And I thought that was really good, actually, doing it that way. It just ticks all the boxes. Save you having an insurance policy and then them having one. And if we're paying, like, say, mine is normally $50 a month, but if you can get the tenant buyer to pay all of it, you save yourself $50 a month. And then you also know it's insured. So just food for thought for everyone. I thought that was really good when I did that filling for that person.
Anyway, guys, we're almost out, so we got 2 minutes left. Hey, Jay, you have another question?
Oh, no, sorry, I forgot to lower my hands. I'm sorry. Oh,
Okay.
quick question.
Yeah.
You're in Texas? Which part in Texas?
I'm in North Dallas.
Oh, I'm in Forney area.
Oh,
East
Forney.
side.
Okay. How far is
That's
Forney
crazy.
from?
That's like 30 minutes drive.
Perfect. I'll meet. We'll have to meet up.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Cool.
Okay,
All right,
bye.
guys. If nobody has any questions, I'll see you all next week. If if there's still interest, I'll be on the forum and see. If there's no interest, I know everybody's going to be busy. Otherwise, I'll see you all next year.